All right, welcome everyone. So we're going to be building a website together tonight. We're going to be building a website similar to this one. So you can definitely use your own information here. I would encourage you to use some lorem ipsum or some filler text tonight, but you could definitely keep this website as a template that you could come back to and use as like a personal website or a resume website. So we're going to get started. We're going to get you to pull up this Replit, and you'll want to fork it so that you have a copy for yourself, and then that way you can follow along. Or you can just pull up any old Replit or code editor and follow along, and we'll be giving out the solution code after this is over. Okay, so let's get started. I made some slides for you. We'll share these slides as well. So first of all, what is HTML? It stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and it's the language that your internet browser reads. So when I say internet browser, I mean like Google Chrome or Firefox or Safari. And it's used to build the structure of your website. So we're going to build all of our structure with HTML, and then we're going to make it look pretty with CSS. So HTML is made up of elements. This here is an element, and we create our elements by pairing two tags. So this is an opening tag, and this is a closing tag. And as you can see, the difference between them is that the closing tag has the /. So a good rule of thumb, whenever you open a tag, you're going to want to close it right away just so that you don't forget to close it. And take a moment to take a look at your keyboard and find these keys. So for HTML, we use the two angle brackets, so the opening and closing angle bracket and the /. All right, are we ready to start coding? So the first thing we're going to talk about is our document setup, and I'm going to head over to the Replit here. So with our document setup, this is what the beginning of every HTML website looks like, or every HTML document looks like. So we have our doc type HTML. This tells the browser, hey browser, now I'm going to start speaking to you in HTML. We have our opening HTML tag here on line 2 and our closing HTML tag here on line 12. Everything we write is nested in between those opening and closing HTML tags. Then we have the head of our document. And the head of the document is for all of the things that we want to communicate to the browser, but we don't necessarily need the user to see it. So things like the link to our style sheet. Hey browser, when you load this web page, you also have to load these styles. And then we have our body tag. And our body is for everything that we want the user to see on the website. All right, you'll notice as well that we've got some indents in our code. So it's really important to keep our code clean and efficient when we're writing it. So notice that if we have tags inside of other tags, I've indented it 1 space. And I've got some examples here. So which one's easier to read? This is the same website. We have option 1 here. Okay, and let's just pretend you've made a mistake somewhere, because I promise you that you will make a mistake at some point. So this is option 1, and this is option 2. And I'm gonna open up the Slido poll here. So go ahead and vote on the answer. So which one do you think is easier to read? Option 1 or option 2? And I'll give you a minute to vote on those answers. I'll go back and show you. So this is option 2, and this is option 1. So if you had to debug some code, which one would you prefer to debug? Yeah, I would say option 2 as well. Awesome. Okay, so let's talk some more about some tags. So we've got the head tag. So again, this holds all of the information that we want to communicate to the browser. We don't necessarily need the user to see it. We have the body. So this is everything on the website that we want the user to see. And for those of you who have some HTML experience or you've seen HTML in the past, what are some tags that we might see nested inside of the body tag? So what are some other tags that we might see on a website? So I've opened up Slido again, if you want to type in a couple of your answers. And if you don't have any experience, that's totally okay. We're going to talk about these in a minute. Yeah, the P tag, the paragraph tag, awesome. Any others that you might have seen? Yeah, a div, that is definitely one that is used quite often. All right, let's talk about some of these. So we have H1 to H6. These are our heading tags. They're used for titles and they go in order of importance. So H1 is the most important title on the page. H2 would be a subtitle. H3 would be a subtitle of a subtitle, and so on. The paragraph tag, so this is used for sentences and paragraphs on the page. And then we have a section tag. So a section groups together like content within a section. So for example, this entire image here, this would be one section. This pink part here, this would be another section. And this green part here, that would be another section. So those are all section tags. Then we have the header and the footer. So the header is the very top section of the website, not to be confused with head and heading. And then the footer is the very bottom section of a website. And then we have div. And a div is a container that keeps content together, but for stylistic purposes only. So div has no meaning. It is only used for styling. Okay, let's start building. We're gonna open up this document and we're gonna do some building now. So I'm going to open up an angle bracket, type the word header, close the angle bracket, and then I'm gonna close my tag. Okay. Inside the header, we have a navigation. So we use the nav tag for that. So I'm gonna open up an angle bracket, type the word nav, N-A-V, and close my angle bracket. Then I can close my tag down here. We're gonna be filling in the navigation. There's a couple things we need to know before we do that, so we'll leave it blank for now. Next, we are going to open up a section. And we're gonna close the section. Okay, we'll leave some space inside of it. Okay, so if we go and look at our website, we have the header that has the nav inside of it, 1, 2 sections, and then a footer. So we're gonna build the same thing. So a header, we've got 1 section, we're gonna create a second section, and a footer. Okay, so I'm gonna run this, and we're not seeing anything on the page yet because we don't have any content on the page yet. Content would be like your words or your images, so we're gonna add that next. So if we go back to our website, we've got a title here. Hi, I'm Britt. This is the most important title on the page, so we'll make this an H1. Then we've got an H2, which is your job title. So I'm a web developer. And then we've got a button here, that says email me. So let's go ahead and put that inside of our first section. So somewhere around line 16. And I'm actually going to put a div here because I want to keep those things together so that I can center them on the page. So inside my div, I have an H1. H1, there we go. Hi, I'm Britt. And then I have an H2, which is like a subtitle. So I'm a web developer. And then a button, which is actually a tag called button. We'll talk about how to make that button go somewhere in a few minutes. And it says email me. Okay, so now if I run this, now I've got some content on my page. Okay, let's build the next section. I'm gonna stop for questions after we get some content onto our website. So if we look at the next section, we've got a section that is pink. We've got a box with a green border, and that box is white. And then we've got a title. It's a subtitle. It's pretty important. It's probably an H2, and then a paragraph. So we have a section, a div, an H2, and a paragraph. So let's go ahead and build that. So inside of our next section, we have a div. Oops. And inside of our div, we have an H2 that says about me. And we have a paragraph. Let's see if we can, we might have to go look up some lorem ipsum and copy and paste it over. I'll just copy and paste this from this site here. All right, so if we run, we've got some more stuff on our page right now. And right now our page is pretty ugly. That's totally fine. We're gonna make it pretty when we get to CSS. Okay, the last section that we wanna build together is our footer. All the footer has inside of it is a H2 that is get in touch and a button that says email me. So it's a very simple website. So we're gonna open an H2 and close it. And we'll say get in touch. And then we're gonna open up another button tag and close it. And in between the opening and closing tag, we'll say email me. Okay, run. And that is most of our content built. So I'm gonna stop here and I'm gonna answer some questions. So let me go ahead over to Slido. And we have, hi, what's the difference between a section and a div? What are the different use cases? That's a great question. So a section is something called a semantic HTML tag. The purpose of a semantic tag is to give meaning to our markup. So section means something to like a screen reader. So if someone is visually impaired, they're using a screen reader to read out their website, and a section has some meaning. A div has no meaning. It is just used for stylistic purposes. The way that I like to think about it is a section is a big container that keeps a group of things together, and a div is a smaller container that keeps things together inside of a section. The analogy that I always like to use when I'm explaining this is pretend that you have Lego all over the floor and you need to move this Lego to the next room. So you can pick up the Lego piece by piece and walk it over to the next room, but you're probably going to still be moving Lego next year. Or you could throw all of the Lego into the container, pick up a container and move the container. So that's a div. The div is the container. We want to be able to move things around on a website, but keep them together. So that would be the purpose of a div. All right, great question. Okay, let's talk about tags with attributes, because we need to talk about those before we can build our navigation. Attributes are extra pieces of information that we attach to the opening tag to tell the browser something more about the opening tag. So some tags have required attributes, like the anchor tag, and we're going to use that tag in a minute. And some tags have attributes that we can, or some attributes we can add to any tag, like a class or an ID. And we'll talk about those in a second too. Okay, so with the anchor tag, we have our opening tag here, A. Inside we have our attribute of href. Href tells the browser where to send the user when the user clicks on the link. Okay, and then we have our value. So in this case, we're sending them to google.com. The opening tag closes here. What we see in between, or what we put in between the opening and closing tag is what the user actually sees on the page. And then we have our closing tag. Okay, so href is a required attribute. We need to tell the browser where to send the user when the user clicks on the link. We also have attributes that we can add to any tag, and those are classes or IDs. A class is one of the most important attributes that you're going to learn about. We use a class to name tags so that we can style them differently. So for example, we've got a couple of different sections on this page. If we wanted to target the top section, we might want to give it a special name, right? So this is how we would do that. We would give this section a class. We would call it like home, or we'd give this section a class and call it about, and then we could target that section to style it. IDs are just like classes, except that you can only use an ID name once on a page. And although they can be used for styling, that's not their primary purpose. The primary purpose of an ID is that they are mostly used to anchor to different sections of a page. So I'm going to come into this website, and my very first section on line 15, I'm going to give it the ID of home. Okay, because in my navigation, when I click on home, I want to anchor to the very top section of the website. So it looks like this, right? If I'm at the bottom and I click home, I want to go back to the top. If I click about, I want to go to the about section. And if I click contact, I want to go to the very bottom of the page. So we're going to give the section on line 22 the ID of about. You can call this anything you want, by the way. But IDs are also case sensitive. So if you're using capital letters, you need to reference them with capital letters. And the footer, we're going to give it an ID of contact. Okay, let's link these inside of our navigation. So we're going to open up the anchor tag. We're going to say href equals, and we're going to open and close some quotations. We're going to close our anchor, or we're going to close our opening tag, and then we're going to close our anchor tag. Inside the href, we want to reference the ID of home. To reference an ID, we use this symbol, the £, or the hashtag, or the octothorpe, and then we call the ID name. So hashtag home references the ID of home. We want the user to see something on the page, so in between our opening and closing a tag, we can write the word home. I'm gonna do the same thing, a href equals, and then I'm going to reference about. So we'll say hashtag about, because I'm referencing the ID of about. Remember that these are case sensitive, so if I used a capital A here, I'd have to reference this with a capital A. And then we're gonna do this one more time for contact. A href equals contact. Hashtag contact. And here we'll put contact. Okay. And there we go. We've got some links on the page. I also want to wrap an anchor tag around my buttons because when the user clicks on the buttons, I want the buttons to be functional. So I'm going to say a href equals, and I'm going to close the anchor tag after the button. We'll fill in the href together in a moment. A href. Solving differences. There we go. A href equals, and we'll close the anchor tag over here. And here I want to, when the user clicks on the button, have the email client open up and populate the to field with my email address. And how we do that is we use mail to : and then your email address. So something like email@gmail.com. Let me make this a little bigger so that we can see a little better. There we go. Okay, and we do the same thing here. So mail to : and then your email address. So email@gmail.com. All right, I'm gonna stop here and answer some questions because we've just built all of the HTML for our website. When would you use article over section? I would probably use article only if I was referencing an article, so like in a news site or a blog. Is section the main container tag you would use when building the website? Yeah, any big container I like to use section for. There is also a semantic tag called main, and that is for the main content of the website. Why don't HTML editors automatically type the close tags? Are there examples where one would not need to close them? So most HTML editors will automatically close the tag for you. So if you're using VS Code, which is what we use here at Lambda School, Sublime Text does this, Atom does this, also CodePen. You just type the name of the tag and hit tab and it will auto close it for you. I'm not sure why Replit doesn't, but it is good practice to type these tags out. So you're building some muscle memory when you're doing things the hard way. Okay, so we've just built all of the HTML for our website. It's not looking very pretty, so next we need to talk about CSS. And CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. This means that the browser reads your styles from the top down. CSS works with HTML to make it look pretty. CSS uses the colon, the semicolon, and the opening and closing curly bracket. So I'm gonna get you to take a second and find those keys on your keyboard. If you're using an English keyboard, they should be somewhere around here. CSS is a different language. It's made up of rules, selectors, properties, and values. This entire thing is a rule. The selector is right here, the H3. The property is color or font size, and the value is red or 1.6 rem. Okay, you can combine as many properties and values inside of these declarations for a single rule. So there's a couple of main parts to a CSS rule. So the selector tells the rule which elements to apply the styles to. And notice that we've just simply called the element by its name here. We don't need any curly brackets, we don't need any angle brackets. The angle brackets are only for HTML. So we can just reference the element H3 by calling it by its name. We just say H3 and open and close some curly brackets. The declaration is where we define our styles. So in between those opening and closing curly brackets. And we include both a property and a value. So in our example, the property was color, the value is red. And we can include as many properties and values inside a declaration as we want. Sometimes they get pretty big. We just need to remember to use a colon in between the property and the value and a semicolon after the value. If you don't use a semicolon or you forget a semicolon or a colon, it can really break things. So you'll just want to be mindful of that. There's different ways to select an element, an HTML element in CSS. So we can call the element by its name. In this case, we're selecting the H1. We can call the element by its class. If we want to reference a class, we put a period or a dot in front of the class name. We can also call an element by its ID. So we would say hashtag and then the ID name. Or we can use something called a parent-child selector. So for example, if I wanted to reference the anchor tags inside of my navigation, I could say nav space A. So we call the parent first and then the child. So the parent would be the navigation, the child would be the anchor tag inside of the navigation. All right, pop quiz, time to see if you've been listening. Head on over to Slido, and I'm gonna open up the quiz for you. You can go ahead and sign up for it with your name. And you win bragging rights if you get all of the questions right. So go ahead and sign up for that quiz. I'll give you a couple minutes to start. I'll put a timer on and we can start in 2 minutes. So go ahead and join that quiz. All right, we're getting some participants now. Got about a minute left to sign up. Okay, I'm going to give you about 10 more seconds and then I'm going to go ahead and start the quiz. All right, first question. How do I select all of the paragraphs on the page? So go ahead and choose your best answer. Five more seconds to get your answers in. All right, so it's actually the bottom answer. We just call the element by its name. So we would just say P and then some curly brackets. We only need the angle brackets inside of HTML. All right, next question. How do I select all of the headings? So if I wanted to select every heading on the page, H1 all the way through to H6, how would I select all of the headings? Three more seconds to get your answers in. Awesome. If you said H1, H2, H3, so on, you are correct. Unfortunately, there's no short way to do this. You've got to type it all out. Next question. How do I select the anchor links inside of the navigation? And 5 more seconds to get your answers in. All right, we call the parent first, nav, and then the child. So it's nav space A. There we go. How do I select every single element on the page? We haven't talked about this, but you can do a quick Google if you wanted to look this up. So how would I select every single element on the page? You've got about 10 seconds left to look it up. Yeah, if you chose the star, you are correct. The star is our universal selector. It selects every single element on the page. How do I select a class called unicorn? So how would I select a class? Yeah, and the answer is .unicorn. So Anon is the winner. Good job. Okay, I think we're ready to start building some CSS. So let's build the styles together. The first thing that you want to check is to make sure that your HTML page is telling the browser, hey browser, you also need to load the styles. And we're going to write our styles in this file here, our style.css file. So we do that by using this link tag in the head of our document. And then inside the href, we call the name of the file that we're writing our styles in. So style.css. And we can test this. We can go inside of style and we can select the body element, which is everything the user sees on the page. And we can change the background color to something like, I don't know, hot pink. Okay, and if our background changes to hot pink, then we know that those two documents are talking to each other. Okay, hot pink's quite ugly, so I'll erase that. Okay, the very first thing I'm gonna do is select everything on the page. I'm going to say box-sizing border-box. This rule just says when I give you a width, respect the width I've given you. If I add padding or a border, apply it within that width. Not in addition to. Okay. Then we are going to set the padding to 0, the margin to 0, because the browser likes to apply some default padding and margin. So we're going to take that away so that we can write our own styles. I like to say max dash width 100%. This tells all of my elements you can never be bigger than your parent. Okay, it stops that dreaded horizontal scroll bar when you try to make a website responsive. And while I'm styling, I like to put a border around all of my elements so I can see where everything stops and starts. So I'm gonna add a border of 1 pixel solid gray. And I'm gonna run this. And now we can see where each of our elements stops and starts. Then I'm gonna write some general styles. These are styles that apply pretty widely throughout my whole website. I use these styles when I'm building almost every site, so feel free to save them and use them or come up with some general styles of your own. The very first thing I do is select the HTML tag and I set the font size to 62.5%. This is pretty common, it's an industry standard. The browser, so the default browser font size is 16 pixels. This makes it so that 1 rem, which is the unit of measurement that I use for fonts, is equal to 10 pixels. Okay. It's also scalable, meaning that the user has control over bumping up and down this font size, so it's accessible. Okay, so now my font looks really small. Then I select the body tag and I set the font back to the size that I wanted. So in this case, we're gonna say font size, and I'm gonna make it 18 pixels. So I'll say 1.8 rem. I like to set some line height here. That does exactly what you think it might do. It controls the space between lines. This doesn't need a unit of measurement, so I'm going to set this to 1.5. I like to change the color to something that is not a really harsh black on a really harsh white. This is an accessibility thing too. So I like to change it to 4F, 4F, 4F. It's a slightly off black, and it's just a little bit nicer on the user's eyes. Black on white is really, really hard to read for a lot of people. All right, so those are some styles that I like to write for the body. I'm going to write some styles for the anchor links. So I will set that color. Probably gonna use a different color here. Probably gonna use a green color, so this kind of green color. So I'll grab that hex code. So that green color is hashtag 506.960. Okay, and then I would say text decoration none, and that's going to remove the underline. I like to add some letter spacing as well, so that controls the space between letters, something like 2 pixels. What else? We can put a hover effect on this so that when we hover over it, it changes color. So we can say A:hover, color, and we can change it to white. I'm going to put a transition on this as well. Transition to S. So this is going to slowly fade in and fade out. It's just one line of code that makes your website look pretty, I don't know, pretty advanced, pretty nifty. So it's going to slowly fade in and fade out. Okay. We're going to change the background color of that navigation, so we'll actually be able to see when we hover over. Okay, and then I'm going to take the H1, H2, and H3. We actually only have H1 and H2, so we'll just use those two. And I'm going to add some letter spacing there as well. 3 pixels. I'm going to change the font size to 2.5 rem. I'm going to center, text align center, to center my titles. And I'm going to take the H1 and make that font size even a little bigger. And we're going to talk about this in a second. So 4 rem. So I've taken H1 and I've targeted it up here, and I changed the font size to 2.5 rem. And then down here, I've selected H1 and I've changed the font size to 4 rem. So you might be wondering, like, why is the H1 40 pixels or 4 rem big? And the reason for that is that CSS is a cascading style sheet, meaning that the browser reads our styles from the top down. What that means is that the most specific, or if the styles are of equal specificity, the most recent style, the one closest to the bottom, is the style that gets chosen, okay? And then I'm going to take my section and my footer, and I'm going to add some padding. So padding adds space inside of an element, margin adds space outside of an element and pushes other elements away from it. The way that I like to remember this is padding protects your insides. So we're going to add space inside. I'm going to add 4% to the top and bottom and 0 to the left and right. So if we're giving padding just 2 numbers, the first number is top bottom, the second number is left right. I'm going to run that, and it's just kind of spaced out my website a little bit more. All right, so those are some general styles. Then I like to go section by section and style everything. So we can say header, section, styles. And we're going to style our navigation here. So nav. We'll give it some padding on the top and bottom, so 2%, 0. Run. Okay, so now we've got some space in our navigation. I also want to give it a background color. And I'm going to give it something called an RGBA value. That's red, green, blue, and the last number is the opacity. And I want it to be this like pink color that's like kind of see-through when you scroll. Okay, so that color is 245218207, and the opacity has to be less than 1, so 0.8. Okay. If you guys are wondering a website that you can use for color inspiration, maybe you don't like my colors, that's totally fine. Neil Orange Peel is a really great website. So Neil, so colors spelt the proper way with the U. So colors.neilorangepeel.com. And this is 3 ways to select a color in CSS. So you can call the color by its name. You can use a hex code, which is a 6-digit alphanumeric value, or you can use something called an RGB value, which gives you a number for red, green, and blue. Hex code is probably the most popular way to call a number or reference a number, or sorry, reference a color in CSS. Okay, so lots of different colors here that you can use. All right, I'll check for questions in a minute. So if you've got questions, go ahead and get those into Slido. In the meantime, we'll keep going here. We'll build a little bit more. Okay, I want to lay out my navigation here. If we notice here, we've got our links perfectly spaced. So I'm going to do that with Flexbox, and Flexbox is a way to lay out a website. So Flexbox CSS tricks. This is some great documentation on Flexbox. Again, we're going to be giving you all of these links after this is over, so don't worry if you lose one. We'll definitely provide those. So Flexbox, basically what we do is we put display flex on the parent container, and it affects the things inside of the parent. So the children, the flex items. And then we can use different rules to manipulate the things inside of the Flexbox. So if I wanted to space everything out evenly, I could use justify content and space evenly. So let's see what that looks like. We're gonna say display flex, justify content, space evenly. Okay, and there we go. Now our links are evenly spaced out. Another thing that I'm going to do here, I want my navigation to stay in one place as I scroll down the page. Notice that my navigation always stays at the top. So I do that by saying position fixed, and we are going to say width 100%. We are going to say top 0 to keep it at the top. And we are going to give it something called a Z index. So if you think of a website as a graph, it would have an x-axis, a y-axis, and the z-axis would kind of be like the 3D axis. So Z index, and the number with the highest Z index is on top of everything else. So I'm going to say 999 in the hopes that nothing will ever be bigger than that. So now if I run this, it stays in one place when I scroll. We'll see it scroll when we have some more stuff on this page, some more styles on this page. Okay, next we want to do our home section styles. So our home section styles, our section with the ID of home. So I'm going to call or reference that ID of home. And if you remember how we reference it, we use the hashtag and then we call the ID name. And I am going to give this a height because I want it to be quite big. I want it to take up most of the page when the user lands on the page. So I'm going to say height, and I'm going to give it a view height. And the view height will take up a certain amount of height for whatever screen size we're viewing this on. So I'm going to give it a 90 view height. So it's going to take up 90% of the view height of whatever screen I'm viewing it on. There we go. Okay, I also want to center those titles. So I'm going to say display flex and justify content center, justify content center, and then align items center. So that's going to center my titles both vertically and horizontally. There we go. And then I also want to align the text center. So I'm going to say text align center. There we go. Okay. I want to change the color of the text. So I'll say color. I'm going to change it to white. And then I want to grab a background image. So a really great website for this is unsplash.com. So go ahead and visit unsplash.com. These are all free images that you can use on your website, so they're royalty free. And you can actually search here as well. So I'm going to search computer, and I'm going to scroll through and find that image that I used as a background image. Down a little further. Here it is. So once you've found an image, you want to right click and copy the image address. So you're going to right click and copy the image address. Okay. And then we'll want to go back to our code and type background-image URL, smooth brackets, single quotes, and paste the image address that we just copied right there. And if you actually copy and paste that into like an empty tab on your browser, you'll see that it's just the image that you're wanting. Okay. There's a couple of more styles that we need to add for background images. So we also need to say background-repeat, no-repeat. And that's going to stop that tiling effect on larger screens. We want to say background-size cover, and that's going to make it fit within a section. And then to get that cool effect where it looks like the image stays in one place and everything scrolls over top of it, that rule is background-attachment, and the value is fixed. So we're going to run this, and there we go. All right, I'm gonna stop and check for some questions. So let me check Slido. No questions yet, so I hope that means everyone is still with me. If you've got questions, go ahead and pop them in there. I'll be checking pretty regularly. All right, let's keep building here. We also want to style the button. So let's target the button. So we can say #home space button. And I'm going to give the button the text a color. So we'll say color. We'll just grab that color we used earlier. So whatever accent color you're using on your website, you can use. I want to give the button some padding. So I'm going to say something like 3% on the top and bottom, maybe 5% on the left and right. Let's run it and see what that looks like. That looks pretty good to me. If I want to round the corners of those buttons, I'm going to give it some border radius, and perfectly round corners would be 10 pixels. So now my corners are rounded. Radius, there we go. And then I want to give it a border. So I'm going to say border, maybe like 3 pixels, solid, and then we'll give it that same color here. So border takes 3 properties: a size, a style, and a color. So we'll run. Okay. And I'm going to give it that transition as well. 2 seconds. And hashtag home button :hover to make it look cool when we hover over it. I'm going to change the background color to that green color. I'm going to change the font color to white. And we can keep the border as is. So let's run. Now when I hover over it, oh, it's not running yet. There we go. Now when I hover over it, it slowly transitions, which looks kind of cool. All right, that is it for our home section. We're flying through this. Let's go to the About section. And if we look at our About section, we've got our section that has a background color. We have our div that has a border around it, and the background color is white. And then we've got some padding in our div too to push the words away from the sides. So let's go ahead and build that together. So we'll say hashtag about space div. Width, we'll tell it how big to be, maybe about 60%. We're gonna say margin, 0 on the top and bottom, auto on the left and right, so automatically adjust the margin equally on the left and right, and that should center that div for us. We're gonna give it some padding, maybe 4%, and that'll push the words away from the edges. So we've got some space here now. We want to give it a border. So same thing, let's give it 3 pixels, solid, and then that green color. Okay, it's looking pretty good. And then we just want to take that About section, so hashtag About, and we want to give it a background color. And I believe the color, so background dash color, was hashtag F5DACF. Yeah. There we go. And then we want to give this a background dash color of white. There we go. So now it's really popping. The last section that we have to style is our footer section. So I'll stop here for a moment and see if there are any questions. And then we'll go style our footer section. No questions yet. Okay, we're almost done. So we want to say footer. We want to give it a background color. It's going to be the same color as our buttons. Okay. We probably want to change the font color to white so we can actually see it. Okay, we want to text align center. Okay, that's going to center our button. We probably want to style our button as well, so we can say footer button, and we can write some styles for it. So let's say padding, 3%, 5%. That's looking a little too big, so let's try like 2%, 4%. Okay, looks a little better. We can round those quarters again with border radius. 10 pixels. I'm gonna make the border white this time. So we'll say color white and border 3 pixels solid, and we'll make it white, and then we'll make the background color that same green color. So let's see what that looks like. Here we go. And then on hover, so footer, button, colon, hover, we want to switch the background color. So background dash color, we'll make that white, and color, we'll make it that green color. And we'll give it that 2-second transition as well. Okay, looks pretty cool. The last thing I'm going to do is push the button away from the title a little bit. So I'll add some margin, margin top, maybe like 2%. And there we go. We've just built our website. If we are happy with it, we can remove the border on line 6. So we can comment or highlight it and hit Command question mark or Control question mark, and it's going to comment that border out for us. And if you want to take a look at what this looks like on a bigger screen, it's looking pretty similar. The thing that's different, I think, here is the fonts. So we can add some fonts, but I'll see if there's any questions first, and then I'll show you how to add some different fonts, and then you can go for the evening. All right. How are the two abouts different? I'm not sure what you're asking, Diego. 2 abouts. I only see 1 about here. 2 abouts different. The font is different. Could it be inside of the HTML that you're talking about? We've got a section with an ID of about. So since it has an ID of about, we can reference the ID down here. Or do you mean here on line 79 and line 86? So here on line 79, we're targeting the div inside the section of about. So about space div. And here we're targeting just the section of about, so this whole section. So on line 79, we're targeting this white box, and on line 86, we're targeting the pink section. On the CSS, one had div and the other didn't. Yeah, so that should answer your question now. So the one with the div is the actual white box, and just the hashtag about is the section with the pink. Okay. When to use percentage instead of pixels? This is a great question. I try to use percentage for almost everything. Pixels I only use on things that are really, really, really small. So things like border radius or things like letter spacing. But otherwise I try to use percentage. So I can write a little note here on units of measurement. So Brit uses percentage for almost everything, and rems for fonts, and occasionally VH for height. So I'll save that comment for you. But percentage for all of my big containers for sure. Yeah. Good, great question. Okay, last thing I want to show you for this evening is how to get different fonts on your website. So there's a really cool website called Google Fonts. So it's fonts.google.com. And we are gonna choose some fonts that we want to use. So I love the font Nunito. So I'm gonna click on that font. And I'm gonna click the style that I want to use here. So in this case, I just want the regular one. and I'm going to click on select this style. We can see that this little window on the side opens up. And I'm going to select a different font for my body. So the rule with fonts is that you want to have, usually you want to mix 2 fonts on a page, but never more than 3. And usually you want to mix a serif with a sans serif. So serif is like a straight font. Sans serif is a straight font. Serif has like those little feet, and those little feet actually help guide the user's eye. So for larger bodies of text, you would want a serif font over a sans serif font, but usually you want to mix at least 2 different fonts on a page, but never more than 3. So I know that a good font that goes with Nunito is Allegra. So I'm gonna also grab that font. I'm also just gonna grab the regular one. So select that style as well. Now I have to add these fonts to my website. So I'm gonna grab this second link tag here, and I'm gonna copy that. And I'm gonna add it to the head of my HTML document because it's all of the things that I wanna tell the browser, but I don't need the user to see. And I'm gonna add it right above my style sheet. So I'm telling the browser, hey browser, when you load this web page, you also have to load these fonts. And I'm doing that above my style sheet because I want to load the fonts before I reference them in my style sheet. So I'm gonna hit run. Notice that nothing has changed here. So now I actually have to go and use those fonts inside of CSS. And if we go back to Google Fonts, you'll notice down here, these look like CSS rules. That's because they are. So I'm gonna use Nunito for my headings. And notice that there's a couple fonts here. This is called a font stack. And this is very common. So let me paste this. What this says is use the font Nunito, and if for some reason Nunito is not loading, then just load a sans serif. Okay, so this is stacking the fonts. So if for some reason Nunito doesn't load, then just load a sans serif font. And then we'll go and grab the other font. And that one is Allegra. Allegria maybe. And that one's saying as well, use this font, and if this font's not available, then just go ahead and use a serif font. So I'm gonna put that in my body. It's the parent of everything that the user sees. So most text on my website should get that. I'm also going to add it to my anchor tags and each of my buttons. So button and button, run. And there we go. Now my website is complete. So I'll check for any final questions and then I'll let you go for the evening. Let's see if there's any final questions here. How do you know which fonts go with other fonts? Yeah, good question. So when you say fonts have feet, what do those look like? So here you can see there's kind of like little tails at the end of my fonts. So let me make this a little bigger so you can see it. Do you see this A has like a little tail at the end of it, whereas this A is super straight? So this is a sans serif font. This is a serif font. Serif is the little feet at the end of the font, and they actually help guide a user's eye when there's lots of different fonts on a page. If you're new to design and you want to see like which fonts would go great together, you can just Google font pairings. And this site right here is really great. So top 50 Google font pairings, and it will show you like 2 different fonts that go together. So Playfair Display and Source Sans Pro, Playfair Display and Alice. So these are all different fonts that you can put together and they look nice together. So you could just scroll through and find a pair that you like, and then you can just go and search for those ones on Google Font and use those ones. Yeah, really good question. All right, any final questions before we let you go for the evening? Okay, thank you so much for joining me.